Imagine standing in a line where every minute you wait is another minute you're losing precious oxygen. This was the reality in the death zone on Mount Everest back in 2019. Donald Cash was a successful executive, and he was used to winning. He believed that with enough money and preparation, success was guaranteed. And he did make it to the summit, but he never made it back down. He was trapped in a massive traffic jam near the Hillary Step. The Sherpas fought for his life like true heroes. They gave him their own oxygen. They carried him, risking everything they had. But at over 28,000 feet, even heroism has its limits. In the end, the guides had to make an impossible choice: leave their client behind on the trail just to save themselves. So how did a long-awaited triumph turn into a tragedy where even the rescuers are forced to turn back? Let's piece together the timeline of this climb, right from the very beginning. A huge rusty car is flying across a salt flat. It's a 1952 Buick. It looks like a pile of scrap metal, but it can hit over 160 miles per hour. Inside is Donald Cash. He's 55 years old, and he's in his element. During work hours, Donald is a completely different person. He holds the title of vice president at the IT giant BMC Software, in charge of global sales. His colleagues know that if you need to close a tough deal or find a brilliant employee, he's your guy. He makes big money and lives a lavish lifestyle in Utah. But he doesn't spend it on boring things. Cash can't stand corporate stuffiness. Instead of gray suits, he wears neon-colored clothes. On his feet, you'll always find a pair of rare, collectible sneakers. And he has a great sense of humor, too. Picture this. The company's vice president walks into the office wearing a fluffy tutu and a pair of wings. He dressed up as the Tooth Fairy for Halloween. He doesn't care about status. He's just having fun. He constantly needs a rush. That's why he buys that car, the famous Bombshell Betty. This machine was built specifically for land speed records. For Donald, it's not just an expensive toy. It's his philosophy. He calls it calculated risk. He's convinced that you have to feel life, here and now. Most men in their 50s buy a fishing rod or a golf club membership. Donald does things differently. Speed on the ground is no longer enough for him. The perfectly flat Bonneville salt flats are just two-dimensional, and Donald is looking for the third. He needs a new level of difficulty, a challenge you can't buy in a car dealership. A plan begins to form in his mind. Not just one mountain, but a global goal, the 7 Summits Challenge. It's an elite club for those who have conquered the highest peak on every continent. 7 giants scattered across the planet, from the eternal snows of Antarctica to the scorching rocks of Africa. To an ordinary person, it sounds like madness or a heroic feat. But for Cash, it's just another ambitious business project. Only instead of a comfortable air-conditioned office, he has glaciers. And instead of competitors, he has thin air and freezing cold. He wants to see if his theory of calculated risk works in the vertical world. He approaches the mountains the same way he approaches quarterly reports at his corporation. Donald is a hardcore realist. He has no illusions. He knows perfectly well that he isn't a professional athlete with iron lungs or a lone hero who grew up in the mountains. He doesn't have decades of experience, so he uses his greatest resource, the one he has in abundance, money. Cash hires the best commercial guides and buys the most expensive gear. His logic is simple and cynical. If you don't know how to fix an engine, you go to an expensive mechanic. If you don't know how to survive at high altitude, you pay people who do. He's essentially buying safety and expertise. It all starts in Africa. Around 2015, the first target on his list is Kilimanjaro. That's almost 20,000 feet above sea level. Technically, it's not the most difficult mountain. You don't have to dangle from ropes over a chasm. But for a newcomer used to an office chair, it's a serious shock to the system. Dust, heat that turns to cold, and an endless walk uphill. But Donald handles it. He stands on the roof of Africa, takes a photo, and puts the first big check mark on his list. The machine is in motion. He gets a taste of victory. Next up is Europe. Sometime around 2016, he heads to Elbrus. The scenery changes here. This is real mountaineering. Donald straps on crampons, special spikes for his boots, and picks up an ice axe. It's tough, but he methodically follows the broad back of his guide. He places his complete trust in the professionals he's hired. And it works. The second summit is conquered. By 2017, the stakes are getting higher. Donald flies to South America. Aconcagua awaits. This is a whole different league, almost 23,000 feet. This is where the comfort zone ends. The air becomes so thin that every step is a struggle. The body is under colossal stress. But Cash endures. He doesn't complain. For him, this is a project that needs to be completed by its deadline, no matter the cost. He's running on pure grit, and he successfully reaches the summit. He now has 3 of the planet's 7 major peaks in his collection. He feels like a winner. It seems to him that he's cracked the code of mountaineering. The formula in his head is working perfectly. Set a goal, throw money at the problem, hire pros, endure temporary discomfort, and get results. For him, mountains have become just another complex task, like a corporate merger. He's confident that everything is under control. He doesn't yet know that this business logic only works up to a certain altitude. Next stop, Alaska. The cold here feels different. While the mountains in Africa and Europe can be forgiving, here, in the far north of America, nature plays for keeps. The 2017 season begins. Donald Cash sets out to conquer Denali, the highest point in North America. Climbers call this mountain one of the most honest. There are no Sherpas to carry your gear, and the weather changes faster than you can zip up your jacket. This time, the conditions on the mountain are extreme. The wind is strong enough to knock you off your feet, and the temperature drops to critical levels. Most teams turn back before reaching the peak. But Donald isn't used to retreating. He keeps moving up. He trusts his guides and his own perseverance. Step by step, through a curtain of ice, he pushes toward his goal, and he makes it. Donald Cash is standing on the summit of Denali. The 4th of the 7 summits is conquered. He feels triumphant. But the mountain exacts its toll on the way down. Donald takes off a glove and realizes something is wrong. He can't feel his right hand. His fingers look strange. They're hard as wood and completely cold. It's deep frostbite. The cold of Denali has pierced through his protection and taken what it wanted. The doctor's verdict is blunt and final. The tissue damage is irreversible. Donald has 3 fingers on his right hand amputated. Now, when he shakes hands with people, his palm looks different. For anyone else, this would have been the end. Losing a part of your body for a hobby is a signal. It's the moment to stop, rethink your life, and return to a warm office and safe business deals. But Donald's reaction surprises even those closest to him. He looks at his maimed hand and sees no tragedy. He doesn't fall into a depression. The injury doesn't scare him. Donald decides that now he simply has to finish what he started, no matter what. He even jokes about his new hand, ordering custom-made mittens. He has no intention of stopping. Donald buys a ticket to Australia. It's 2018. He already has 4 big check marks on his 7 summits list. But stopping halfway isn't in Donald's rulebook. He flies to the other side of the world to check off the continent of Australia. Different peaks count for the program, but for him, the point is the same, a checkmark on the list. He methodically executes his plan. His injured hand, tucked into a special mitten, doesn't stop him from scrambling up. He adapts. If he can't grip rocks like he used to, he finds another way. For him, it's just another work task. A problem arose, a solution was found. We move on. Another peak in the 7 Summits program is done. But nature has a real test in store for him in January of 2019. Donald travels to the very bottom of the world, to the Vinson Massif in Antarctica. Here, the air is dry and sterile, and the sun shines 24 hours a day, giving your eyes no rest. The temperature drops so low that any exposed skin instantly loses all feeling. Donald pushes for the summit, and he does it again. He stands on the highest point of the frozen continent. Success. But Vinson, like Denali, takes its payment. When Donald gets back to camp and looks at himself, he sees new damage. The tip of his nose has turned black. The frost has once again found a way through his gear. First his fingers, now his face. He looks at his blackened nose and jokes about it. Humor is his defense mechanism. He laughs that he's gradually getting lighter for the main event. No panic, no drama. His family sees these changes. They meet him at the airport, looking at his bandaged hand and face. They understand that this hobby is becoming dangerous, but they also see the look in his eyes. Donald is on fire with this idea. To forbid him from continuing would be to extinguish that fire. His loved ones choose to support him. They don't try to talk him out of it, even as the anxiety in their home grows with each passing day. Now, only one goal remains for Donald, the final piece of the puzzle, Everest, the highest, the most desired, and the most treacherous point on Earth. He is certain he's ready. He has 6 continents, survival experience, and a team of professionals behind him. What he doesn't know is that his previous injuries weren't just accidents. They were the final warnings, warnings he chose to ignore. There are only a few months left before his flight to Nepal. In the spacious office of the vice president, the lights go out, and the door closes for the last time. Most people cling to high-level positions in major corporations with a death grip, but Donald does things differently. The calendar reads late 2018. Cash makes a radical decision. He resigns from BMC Software. For him, this is a complete reset of his former life. Donald announces he's taking a sabbatical, a long, creative leave. He gives himself exactly 5 months of total freedom. No more meetings, no more quarterly reports, no more client calls. His schedule now has only one task, and it demands absolute concentration. To make sure there are no misunderstandings, Donald logs into his LinkedIn profile. He deletes the prestigious line, Vice President of Global Sales. In its place, a new strange title appears, one he made up himself, Chief Executive Mountaineer. Colleagues see the update in their feeds and smile. To them, it looks like another eccentric joke from good old Don. But for Cash himself, it's a declaration. He's no longer managing a sales department, he's managing his own survival. He is the CEO of a project called Everest. Just before leaving, he picks up his phone and sends messages to his closest friends. The text is short, but it's laced with a dark humor. Donald promises to return in June, alive and with all my fingers. His friends read it and laugh nervously. The joke feels like he's tempting fate. It's as if Donald is telling the universe, I've already paid my price, you can't take anything more from me. But at home, the jokes stop. In the evenings, Donald sits down at the table with his wife, Monette. Spread before them are dry, analytical reports. Together, they study the risks. It's like preparing for a complex business deal, only instead of financial losses, the risks column lists cerebral edema, avalanches, and frostbite. Monette reads the statistics on Everest, and she sees the numbers that explain what happens to the human body in the death zone above 8,000 meters. She understands that even the most prepared people simply, slowly, fade away up there. The family is fully aware of the danger. They know the mountain doesn't forgive overconfidence. But Donald looks at those same documents with different eyes. Where his wife sees a mortal threat, he sees a technical challenge. He has a plan, the best gear, the money, and a team. He convinces his family that he has the situation completely under control. Cash believes that his experience on 6 continents and his meticulous preparation are his guarantee of safety. He closes the folder of documents. The decision is final. He is ready for the final push. Everest in May of 2019 doesn't resemble a sacred mountain so much as a crowded subway station at rush hour. Donald arrives in Nepal, and any illusion of solitude instantly vanishes. Base camp is a sprawling city of yellow tents, humming with the noise of generators and echoing with languages from every corner of the globe. For his final mission, Donald chooses a Nepalese operator, Pioneer Adventure. It's a budget outfitter that relies on volume. There's no Western Polish here, but there are local guides who know the mountain by heart. Donald finds himself in a huge mixed group. 15 clients from different countries are set to make the summit push with him. The group is led by an experienced high-altitude leader. Managing such a crowd at this altitude is a task bordering on the impossible, but Donald isn't fazed. He knows his own weaknesses, so he decides to hedge his bets. Donald hires not 1, but 2 personal Sherpas. Their names are Lakpa Nurbu and Pasang Tenji. This is his personal guard. While others were cutting costs, Donald was buying himself a double insurance policy. His strategy is simple and pragmatic. Use as much oxygen as possible and never, for a single moment, unclipped from the fixed ropes that line the path to the summit. He isn't there to be a hero. He just wants to get up and get down, using his oxygen tanks as fuel for his body. But the mountain has its own plans for the season. The weather in 2019 is acting strangely. Normally, spring offers several weeks of calm, sunny weather when the winds die down. But now, the weather windows, the periods for a safe summit attempt, are shrinking to just a few days. This creates a bottleneck effect. Hundreds of climbers who have been waiting in their tents for weeks all get the green light at the same time. The situation becomes tense. Everyone knows there's only one route. It's a narrow trail on a ridge where two people can't pass. When hundreds of people start their summit push simultaneously, it creates the one thing climbers fear most: a traffic jam. But this isn't a traffic jam on the highway, where the worst that can happen is you're late for dinner. Here, at the cruising altitude of a jetliner, time is literally the air in your tank. Donald sees these forecasts. He understands that he'll have to stand in line on a vertical wall in minus 30-degree temperatures. But it's too late to turn back. His two-man Sherpa team is ready. The oxygen has been checked, and his determination is off the charts. He takes a step into the zone where human logic ceases to apply, hoping his two-guide plan will work even in this chaos. At 8,000 meters, the only music is the hiss of oxygen in your mask and the rasp of your own breathing. On the night of May 22nd, Camp 4 is like an anthill that's been kicked. Donald Cash steps out of his tent into the darkness. The wind has died down, the sky is clear, and the stars are burning as bright as spotlights. It seems like the perfect moment, but that very perfection is a trap. Donald looks up and sees what climbers call the snake. It's a chain of headlamps winding vertically upwards, straight into the black sky. It's a beautiful sight, but to a professional, it means only one thing: disaster. There are more than 200 people on the slope at the same time. They all decided to push for the summit in the same weather window. The Pioneer Adventure Group merges into this stream. It feels less like a mountain ascent and more like the checkout line at a supermarket on the day before a holiday. Only here, you can't just switch to another line or ask them to open another register. People are just standing there, clipped to a single rope. The movement is stop and go. One step, a stop, a 5-minute wait, another step. For Donald, this pace is grueling. His body is working at its absolute limit. The ascent, which takes strong climbers 6 or 7 hours, stretches into an endless 12 for Cash. This is a critical amount of time. Every hour at this altitude burns through the body's resources faster than running a marathon. Donald moves like an astronaut in crushing gravity. Every lift of his leg requires an immense effort of will. Lhakpa Nurbu and Pasang Tenji stick by his side, never leaving him. His personal Sherpas are acting like nannies. They're not just showing him the way, they are literally managing his life support. One watches his safety line, constantly reclipping Donald's carabiners to the fixed ropes because he himself is moving too slowly. The other monitors the regulator on his oxygen tank. They can see their client is weakening. The Sherpas understand. The longer they spend going up, the lower their chances will be for the descent. But the weather is pristine, crystal clear, not a cloud in the sky. And this plays a cruel trick. The visibility is perfect, there's no wind, and it creates a false sense of security. Donald feels like everything is going according to plan, just a little slower than expected. He doesn't notice his own battery running critically low. He's surrounded by hundreds of people, all moving toward the same point, creating an illusion of collective success. The clock ticks past noon, and Donald is still on his way to the summit. Below him, the earth ends, and above, there is only the deep blue of space. On the morning of May 22nd, Donald Cash takes one last agonizing step and stops. There's nowhere left to go. He is standing on the summit of Everest at 8,848 meters. Around him is a panorama seen by only a handful of people, the curve of the planet and the peaks of other 8,000ers, which from here look like small hills. But for Donald, this isn't just a beautiful view. It's the finish line of his personal marathon. The 7 Summits program is officially complete. The office worker who started climbing after he turned 50 has just achieved a goal of elite mountaineers: Africa, Europe, South and North America, Antarctica, Australia, and now Asia. All the planet's major peaks are now in his logbook. Donald can barely stand from exhaustion, but adrenaline keeps him moving. He pulls out his flags. It's a mandatory ritual. He unfurls the banners, fighting the wind and his own clumsy movements in thick mittens. L'Hakba and Pasang take out their cameras. The click of the shutter. Donald poses. He wants to capture this moment forever. In these photos, he looks like a victor. His mask hides his face, but his posture says it all. He is happy. But time flows differently on the summit. Every minute here is costly. The Sherpas glance at their watches and at the crowd of people still ascending the narrow ridge, creating a jam even here, on a tiny patch of snow about the size of a dinner table. Donald needs to start his descent, but he lingers for one more moment. He takes out a voice recorder or his phone. He needs to send a message to those waiting for him down below, in the warmth and safety. He presses the record button. Through the hiss of the wind and the plastic of his oxygen mask, his voice comes through. It's halting, breathless, but firm. This message is for Monette and his children. Donald doesn't hold back his emotions. He speaks words of gratitude. He thanks God for giving him the strength and the opportunity to be standing here, on top of the world. His voice is filled with joy and relief. In these few seconds, Donald Cash feels what he endured the cold and the pain for. The reason he lost his fingers on Denali. He feels absolute happiness. His dream has come true. It seems to him that the hardest part is over. He's on the summit. He's alive. He's won. He doesn't know yet that this message will be his farewell. The euphoria of success masks the signals from his body, which has already spent its entire reserve of energy on the long, 12-hour ascent. The Sherpas tap him on the shoulder. It's time to go. Donald takes his first steps down from the summit. He only makes it a few meters. The altitude is just below the peak, around 8,800 meters. This is one of the most dangerous parts of the route, a narrow, rocky ridge. Suddenly, Donald collapses onto the snow. He doesn't put his hands out to break the fall. The lights just go out instantly. He loses consciousness right there on the trail. For Lakpa and Pasang, this is a nightmare scenario. Their client is lying motionless on a narrow ledge. To the left is a drop of several kilometers. To the right, an equally steep abyss. And all around them is chaos. Other climbers, on their way to the summit or back, literally step around Donald's prone body. No one stops. At this altitude, there's no room for sympathy. Everyone is fighting for their own next breath. Climbers dig their crampons into the rock, just inches from his still body, creating a surreal scene of utter indifference. The Sherpas move fast. They know the rule. If someone doesn't get up in the next 5 minutes, they'll stay here forever. They start resuscitation right there on the snow. Lakpa checks the mask and the regulator. He decides to go all in. The Sherpa cranks the oxygen flow to the absolute maximum. A powerful jet of pure oxygen, 4 liters a minute, blasts into Donald's lungs. This is a massive drain on their resources. They're burning through the emergency supply they need for the descent, but they have no choice. The oxygen shock works. Donald's eyes open. Consciousness returns in a sudden jolt. He sees the faces of his guides leaning over him, hears the whistle of the wind and the ragged breathing of the people around him. The most amazing thing is, he can speak, and he's making sense. He understands where he is and who is with him. The brain, flooded with oxygen, has rebooted. Donald tries to stand. He commands his muscles, pushing his hands against the snow. And then, something terrifying happens. His legs won't obey him, at all. He can feel them, but they feel alien, like sacks stuffed with cotton. This isn't just weakness, it's paralysis. The altitude has hit his cerebellum, the center that controls coordination and movement. In a split second, the situation goes from dire to hopeless. Lakpa and Pasang try to lift him by his arms, like a wounded soldier on a battlefield. But Donald is a big man. In full gear, with his tanks and heavy boots, he weighs close to 100 kilograms. At the cruising altitude of a jumbo jet, a deadweight body doesn't feel like 100 kilos. It feels like a ton. The laws of physics are working against the rescuers, but for Lakpa Nurbu and Pasang Tenji, impossible isn't in their vocabulary. They begin a descent that's more like a battle against gravity than an organized evacuation. A helicopter can't fly here. You can't use a stretcher. The only way to get Donald down is to drag him. The Sherpas become a human tow rope. They clip Cash into their own harness systems. One pulls from the front, the other pushes and belays from behind. It's grueling work. Donald is conscious, trying to help, to pull with his arms, but his legs are just dead weight, snagging on every rock and icy ledge. The route here isn't some smooth, snowy slope. It's a series of sharp, snow-dusted rocks. The descent is more dangerous than the climb up. The path winds between sheer drops. The Sherpas have to literally move Donald's legs by hand, inch by inch, to keep him from sliding into the abyss. They are working at the very limit of human endurance. Every few meters, they stop to catch their breath, gasping in the thin air. Suddenly, a new problem: oxygen. Because they cranked Donald's O2 to the max to revive him, his tank is now emptying at an alarming rate. The pressure gauge is dropping toward zero. Without oxygen, Donald will lose consciousness again and die within minutes. Lakpa and Pasang look at each other. No words are needed. They do something not every brother would do for a brother. The Sherpas unclip their own regulators. They take off their full oxygen tanks and give them to Donald. They take his nearly empty ones for themselves, or spares with minimal reserves. It's the ultimate sacrifice. They are willingly cutting off the fuel that keeps them warm and allows them to move, just so their client can keep breathing. Now, the risk to their own lives has multiplied. They're moving in a state of semi-asphyxiation, but they keep dragging the heavy man down. In this state, they cover several dozen of the most terrifying meters on the mountain. They approach the Hillary Step. It's a narrow, rocky ridge with a sheer drop on both sides. It's a single-file passage, and right now, that single-file passage is completely blocked. A long line of climbers is making its way up from below, heading for their dream. There are dozens of them. They move slowly, step by step, clipped into the single safety rope. For a rescue operation, this is a death sentence. In a normal spot, you could go around someone, but on the Hillary Step, passing is physically impossible. There's an abyss to the right, an abyss to the left, and a human traffic jam in the middle. Lakpa tries to shout, to gesture, to beg them to make way for an injured man, but the climbers in line have tunnel vision. All they see are the boots of the person in front of them. No one turns around. No one steps aside, because there is nowhere to step. The group is forced to a halt. Their downward progress stops completely. This is the worst possible thing that can happen at 8,800 meters. As long as you're moving, your muscles are working, your blood is circulating, your body is generating heat. The moment you stop, the cold seeps in like water into a leaking boat. Donald lies in the snow, clipped to the safety line, as a slow procession of strangers' feet inches past him. He waits. Lakpa and Pasang wait. They are trapped. The traffic jam clears with agonizing slowness. 10 minutes pass, then 20, then an hour. Time stretches like rubber. All told, they're stuck in this gridlock for nearly 2 hours. For Donald's weakened body, this is fatal. He lies motionless in the freezing wind. Even with someone else's oxygen, his body is getting colder. The resources his system mobilized after the initial collapse are running out. Hypoxia, oxygen starvation, is returning despite the mask. At this altitude, the atmospheric pressure is so low that even pure oxygen isn't absorbed well if the heart isn't pumping it through the body with active movement. Donald, who was talking and trying to help just a short while ago, begins to fade. His gaze becomes glassy, his response is slow. He doesn't complain, he doesn't moan, he's just quietly shutting down, like a phone battery dying in the cold. The Sherpas see it, but they are powerless. They can't move the mountain of people in front of them. All they can do is watch as the precious minutes of their client's life tick away, while the queue of people hoping for a summit selfie continues its crawl upward. The line finally starts moving, but for Donald, it no longer matters. Lakpa Nurbu shakes his shoulder, but there's no response. The Sherpa puts a hand to his client's neck. There's no pulse. Donald's heart, exhausted by the cold and the lack of pressure, has stopped. The machine that had been running for 55 years grinds to a halt at over 8,000 meters. At this moment, perhaps the most desperate rescue act of the season begins. The Sherpas refuse to accept death as a fact. They start CPR, right there on the narrow trail. Imagine trying to bring someone back to life in a place where every movement drains your last reserves of strength. Other climbers pass by. Some look on in horror, others look away, but no one stops to help. Up here, it's every man for himself. The two Sherpas work together. 30 minutes pass, an hour and a half. They don't give up. For nearly 2 hours, they do everything they can to bring him back. It's an unbelievably long time in the death zone, where survival is usually measured in minutes. But the mountain does not give back what it has taken. Around noon on May 22nd, a final silence falls. The Sherpas stop the compressions. They understand. Donald Cash is gone. Biological death is now absolute. What lies before them is no longer a client, but a body weighing close to 100 kilograms. And then reality hits them, hard. While they were trying to save Donald, giving him their oxygen and spending their energy on resuscitation, their own reserves ran out. Their gauges show critical levels. The oxygen is gone. They burned all their fuel on an attempt that failed. Now, Lakpa and Pasang face the most terrible choice any guide can make. There are only two options. First, try to bring the body down, but without oxygen, exhausted from a 2-hour fight for his life, they simply won't make it. They'll collapse 100 meters down and stay here forever. The second option, save themselves. They look at each other. They have families too. They did everything they could, and more. The logic of survival dictates a brutal decision. They unclip the carabiners. The body of Donald Cash is left lying near the Hillary Step, on the summit he dreamed of. The Sherpas turn and begin a rapid descent, trying to outrun the hypoxia and death that is now chasing them. Their lungs try to pull in air but find only an icy void. The Sherpas know they are walking on a razor's edge. If one of them stumbles or sits down to rest, he'll never get up again. And then, something happens that defies all logic. Pasang Tenji, himself in a semi-conscious state, spots a figure ahead. It's another climber in the same deadly predicament. He's out of oxygen, disoriented, and unable to take another step. He's just sitting there, waiting for the end. Pasang could have just walked by. No one would have blamed him. He's barely alive himself. He just lost a client, and he's spent every last ounce of his strength. The instinct for self-preservation is screaming, "Save yourself!" But Pasang stops. He cannot bear a second loss in one day. The Sherpa finds some hidden, inhuman reserve of strength. He grabs the stranger, screams him back to his senses, and starts helping him down. It is an act of pure heroism. A man with no resources left for himself is sharing life with another. They manage to make it to a lower camp. Pasang survives, and he saves a stranger's life, as if atoning for a guilt that was never his to bear. Meanwhile, the news reaches the state of Utah. The Cash family receives the terrible message. Shock gives way to the need to make a pragmatic decision. Donald's body lies at an altitude of over 8,000 meters. To bring it down would require an expedition of 10 to 12 of the strongest Sherpas. They would have to risk their own lives, navigating the same traffic jams and icy walls while carrying a heavy load. Monette, Donald's wife, and his children discuss it. They know his character. Donald always valued life and the safety of others above any ambition. The family knows he would never have forgiven them if someone else died just to retrieve his empty shell. The risk is too great. They make a difficult but an undeniably correct decision. They will not recover the body. They leave him to the mountain. The official report states the cause of death was high-altitude sickness. Medical experts believe his brain simply shut down from the strain, but his family is convinced it was something else. They knew how full of life Donald was. They believe his heart simply stopped at the peak of emotion and physical exertion. Now, Donald Cash will forever remain where he dreamed of being. His 7 Summits project was complete, in the most final way imaginable. He became a part of the very mountain he was so driven to conquer. Donald's death wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a system failure. In that same year, 2019, Nepal issued a record-breaking number of climbing permits, 381, an all-time high. Base camp was overflowing with people. Commercial expeditions were bringing up hundreds of clients, guides, and tons of gear, all of them sitting in their tents, waiting for the perfect weather. But that season, nature had other plans. The forecast was dire. The safe window, when the winds die down, would only be open for 2 or 3 days at the end of May. Climbers usually have weeks to play with, but now, the entire schedule was squeezed into a single moment. The expedition leaders were in a bind. They had hundreds of clients who'd paid a fortune, and no one wanted to call off the ascent. And so, a chain reaction began. Every single team on the south side decided to push for the summit at the exact same time. On the night of May 22nd, hundreds of people set out on the narrow path. It was like trying to evacuate a stadium through a single narrow door. Donald Cash was in the first wave of that human tide. He didn't know yet that he was walking not towards the summit, but into a giant trap. And in the very moments that Donald's heart was failing, the world got its first visual proof of the unfolding disaster. This is the moment a photograph was taken. A photograph that would go viral and change the image of Everest forever. In the picture, you see a colorful snake of down jackets. People are standing packed together, clipped by carabiners to a single rope. A sheer drop on one side, a sheer drop on the other. The photo went viral instantly. To the internet, it looked like a simple cue, but climbers saw an incredibly high-stakes situation. In a line like that, you can't turn back. You can't get past someone who's moving slowly. People were forced to stand still at an altitude of 8,000 meters for hours. And if you're not moving, you're freezing. But the most terrifying part, they're breathing. Their oxygen tanks are draining away for nothing. Precious oxygen wasn't being used to push for the summit, but just to wait. In that same line, on that very same ridge, an Indian climber named Anjali Kulkarni also perished. The scenario was chillingly similar. She successfully reached the peak, but got stuck in the same deadly traffic jam on the way down. Her strength ran out before the crowd thinned. She died of exhaustion in the arms of her Sherpas, simply because she couldn't get down. The season's statistics read like a report from a war zone. 11 dead, 9 on the Nepal side, 2 in Tibet. It was one of the darkest seasons in history. Journalists decried how the mountain had become a business, while Nepalese authorities scrambled to defend themselves. But no amount of investigation could bring back those left behind on the trail, victims of a traffic jam. The news reached Utah. Headlines screamed about the deadly season and the graveyard of ambitions. But the Cash family saw it differently. For them, the phrase "he died living his dream" wasn't some empty cliché. It was the simple truth. Donald knew the rules of the game. He knew the price of risk, and he paid it in full. The family decided no black clothes, no quiet tears in the living room. That wasn't Donald's style. On the day of his farewell, his wife Monette and their children did something that might seem strange to outsiders. They put on athletic clothes and laced up their sneakers. They went outside and ran a marathon. They ran in honor of their father and husband. They pushed through the miles. For them, it was about feeling life through action, through physical strain, not through sorrow. They knew that Donald, the man who dressed up as the Tooth Fairy and raced a rusty junker car, would have approved of only this kind of goodbye. As for Donald Cash, he remains right where he wanted to be. His body lies at an altitude of 8,800 meters near the Hillary Steppe. He is now part of the eternal ice and the history of Everest. He lived his 55 years at full throttle with the pedal to the metal, and his journey ended in the one place he wanted to be most. But the price for that summit was higher than anyone could have ever planned.